comments supposedly made by that major Conservative donor a couple of days ago continued yesterday. Further allegations emerged.
Now, this comes as Sunak faced mounting pressure yesterday to hand back the money donated by Frank Hester and his healthcare firm. Here's a taste of what went down during PMQs.
Mr. Speaker, the man bankrolling the Prime Minister also said that the member for Hackney North should be shot. Shame. How low would he have to sink? What racist, woman-hating threat of violence would he have to make before the Prime Minister plucked up the courage to hand back the £10 million that he's taken from him?
Mr. Speaker, I'm absolutely not going to take any lectures from somebody who chose to represent an anti-Semitic terrorist group, Hizb ut-Tahrir, who chose to serve a leader who let anti-Semitism run rife in this Labour Party. Those are his actions, those are his values, and that's how he should be judged.
Interesting. Joining us now, TalkTV's political correspondent, Alicia Fitzgerald, and former Conservative advisor, James Price. Let's start with that. I don't know whether... what did you make of it?
Which part?
All of it, really.
I mean, it's just been a massive disaster, really, hasn't it? I mean, and then the fact that at Prime Minister's questions, it just became this kind of mudslinging between the two parties, saying, no, you're more racist, no, you're more racist. And you have to really look at that. That's the leader of the Labour Party and our Prime Minister using racism as a kind of political game, really. And it was quite a painful watch, I think.
And James, for us yesterday, we were sat here. There is nobody that doesn't... I mean, bearing in mind, you know, those two poor MPs, Amos and Joe Cox, who lost their lives, you cannot, in a civilised society, whether you can't be misquoted saying, I'd rather shoot somebody. That doesn't work. We can sit here and argue about the optics of why Sunak didn't come out sooner, why he sent his young ministers out to say no, and then by 10 o'clock at night when Kemi Badenoch came out. But this is, in a way, when I looked at that yesterday, I don't understand why somebody did... Well, I don't know why they had to whisper in his ear. Just give the money back. It's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Well, I think it's a peculiar argument to say, right, you've done a terrible thing, you've said some stupid stuff, now here's £10 million back. I think there's a bit of a moral hazard there, right? If anything, he should be giving more money to other good causes as a means of penance. I think
that's a very good point.
There's one point there. I think
very interesting.
There's two
very
things
interesting.
here. I think, as Alicia says, there's just a lot of politics being injected into all of this. Diane Abbott is not a Labour MP at the moment.
Here's the
not a
interesting
Labour
thing
MP
as well.
because she said that Jewish people and Roma people and other people can't really experience racism. And what was it? That it's like being teased if you're ginger, right? It's a horrible thing. She's also said things. If we want to do the mudslinging, you know, she said that Chairman Mao, the man responsible with his communist ideology for the deaths of more humans than anybody else of all time, on balance did more good than harm, right? We can all throw these things around if we want to. I think the problem is it gets that here is that the Labour are desperate to throw this, the Tories are desperate to throw back. Where have we lost this idea that people can mess up, can be forgiven, can show contrition, and can be shown grace? You know, the idea that even if you don't necessarily deserve to be fully forgiven, in a society you can be. These are the kind of concepts that built Western civilization, and we're losing them here.
And James, I accept that, you know, he has apologised for having been rude, but he didn't accept that what he said was racist. I think your point is completely valid, but only if he says, do you know what, this is a few years ago, I've since learned that is racist, it's wrong, and I won't do it again. But how can the Tory party possibly have faith that he won't make those comments again if he hasn't even accepted that they were racist?
But you see, I sort of feel like I get that. I feel like I need to jump in very quickly and just say, I don't know if other people know this, but I'm sure they do. Diane Abbott, now several people on the left, McDonnell and Harriet Harman, are saying she should be reinstated to the Labour Party, which completely muddies the water. If this guy should apologise for being racist, and I don't disagree with you, why isn't Diane Abbott apologising for Has she apologised?
Yes, she apologised.
She has. So why haven't they let her back then? Then we take the argument on, right?
Yeah,
Can you apologise and be allowed back?
Right.
I personally thought it was disgusting. She wasn't allowed to speak yesterday in Prime Minister's question time. She tried to stand up 40 times. And I don't like Diane Abbott, but you can't say shoot somebody, but then you can't also... If people apologise, should they be allowed back? What would you both say to that?
Well, I think that's a great point, isn't it? And I think that, as you say, that it has to be with apologies in general, right? If someone says there's this Weasley way, you can say, I'm sorry for any offence caused, right?
Yeah.
And you can make it that kind of passive apology. And that's not just limited to politics. I'm sure we've all done that with our parents, colleagues as we grow up, all these sorts of things.
Yes.
Right? Apologies, as the philosopher Elton John said, sorry seems to be the hardest word.
Yes.
Wow. How many Elton John titles can you get in?
Well,
Alicia,
it's
not going away, is it?
I just want to ask you on that point that Sunak made about Starmer having represented previously terrorist groups. Now, that was in his role as a barrister. That's like saying to a medic, oh, you've previously treated a terrorist as part of your job, therefore you are as bad as them. It's not fair comment, is it?
I feel like definitely not, given the context as well. I mean, it was that alongside him comparing it to Angela Rayner calling the Tories scum. And everyone kind of said, fine, that's an insult. It's pretty standard in politics. I mean, I'm not to say it should be. It's, it's not great, but it's not the same as being racist to someone,
and saying
calling
someone should be shot.
Scum. So I think that's the trouble. I think Rishi Sunak yesterday was really trying to just kind of say, OK, well, you can't have a go at us because you've done this, and this, when actually all of those things combined didn't really stack up against someone actually making a comment, which unanimously pretty much everyone agrees was a racist comment. So I think there's a big disparity between the two there.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, what do you think happens next, James? Do you think, Starmer seems pretty certain that he's not going to return the money. Do you think there could be calls for him to...
Sunak.
Sorry, Sunak, I'm so
And
sorry.
it looks pretty certain that he ain't going to get Diane Abbott back in the Labour Party anytime soon either, because that is a massive hot potato for him. Anti-Semitism, isn't it? I mean, he's made a big thing.
Yeah, I think it's tricky for Starmer to let Diane Abbott back in again, because there is the legitimate criticism of Starmer that he spent a lot of time as an MP trying to make Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister. And he's tried to say the Labour Party has changed, but when you see some of the stuff still coming out of his own ranks, it's very difficult. I think there's therefore a limit to how far Starmer will be able to push this. I mean, it came out yesterday. A Labour donor has given millions of pounds to the Labour Party, described Hamas as freedom fighters, right? So we can do this.
What about my example yesterday in 2018 when Jeremy Corbyn took £500,000, the Labour Party, from Max Mosley?
Right, or when he was a backbencher and he was
back
on Iranian state TV taking tens of thousands of pounds for that when they throw gay people off roofs and all this.
Do you know the thing is, at the end of the day, you go, they're all as bad as each other. I saw you shaking your head. I want to talk very quickly about the extremism debate today. Very quickly, Alicia. Michael Gove is making this announcement. Speak to you in a sec, James. What is the definition? What are people supposed to think waking up? I
mean, it's kind of just a more specific definition than it was before. So before the issue was help.
You're all right.
No, clearly not. The issue was that it was too broad and that people were having trouble interpreting it because it became a bit of a grey area. You could say, you could argue that something was extremist, but there wasn't anything to necessarily tie you down to make sure that what you were looking at did fall into that category. So now what the government have done is try and tighten that definition and make it easier for people to know exactly what counts as extremism and what doesn't.
You were shaking your head as we were speaking to Raj there. For me, free speech is the very epicentre of what we are as a nation. But I will not move from the fact that there are people marching, and they are innocent people, but they are being...
What does this have to do with marches? This is what I'm...
No, I presume... But look, he was shaking his head when the guy said that when I said there were fanatics and extremists. Is that what this is aimed at? I don't know. Tell me what you were thinking, because you were shaking your head.
No, I think that exactly as you say, right? So free speech, cornerstone again of Western liberal democracy, very, very important. What we have whenever these things happen is people tend to, in the extremes, use those sorts of rights and cherished freedoms against us. So you have every single Saturday, you have people going on these marches. So now central London is basically off limits to someone who looks visibly Jewish. Every Saturday. Is that just what we're going to do forever now? I've got friends I've been on these marches, have faced abuse, all the rest of it. And bearing in mind that the first one of these happened the day after the October 7th massacre outside the Israeli embassy. Before any Israeli comeback, there were these kinds of things happening. We've seen, I think, clearly double standards of policing going on, where if you act peaceably, the police will be rough, and if you look like you're going to be violent and kick off, the police will just back away. And so I think that you've got a lot of people here who are using these definitions, butting up against them, testing things, showing a kind of cultural chauvinism almost to threaten people away. And that is obviously not what we want in a kind of free speech society, and rights have to be balanced off against each other.
I think just quickly what Nicola was saying is right, though, in terms of this definition. It is more about where, like, funding going into government. It's more about working out what organisations count as extremist organisations that could play into government rather than specifically the marches.
And individual extremism or expressions of extremism. It's more to do with what groups can or cannot now be funded by government, but you'd think that they'd be on top of that anyway. They've just created more rules for themselves.
Sorry.
No, well, I think it's like the deep throat in the Watergate scandal, right? Follow the money. And I think the government has been really weak on this stuff. I think that, again, people have been using our kind of cherished freedoms, our advanced banking sector, all these kinds of things. You go and actually follow the money the way that lots of these organisations are funded. They're funded by our enemies. They're funded by people who hate everything about this country and everything we stand for. I think we need to be much, much firmer on getting to the bottom of this, because there's a kind of radicalisation that's happening that is hidden.
But
people
this is
show
about
two faces.
government funding.
And the government can also go after their various sources of funding, right? We have the power to lock people's bank accounts and all this sort of stuff and sanctions, and we don't do it for fears of causing various kinds of community tension, right? But that also means that millions of people, of let's say the Muslim faith in this case, who are decent, law-abiding, honest people, just like the rest of us, are being subjected to these kinds of things behind closed doors. We have the power to stop this from happening, to de-radicalise elements of our society. We're not taking it through fear of causing offence, and that's going to lead to worse problems down the line.
It's a very fascinating conversation.
Thank you
so
guys
much for joining us this morning, Alicia Fitzgerald and former Conservative advisor James Price.